Hello and welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter at NJH287, also on LinkedIn where I post more content. The website for the pod is dsmsports.net. We can find all the episodes as well as other content. And of course, follow along, subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. An awesome show for you guys today. I wanted to explore this subject for a long time. I had the perfect guest on. My guest on the podcast today is Aileen McManamon. She is the founder and managing partner of 5T Sports, and she specializes in brand management, brand marketing, but really also with a focus on initiatives to drive sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion, things that are really important, more important than ever right now, and more vigilant than ever when it comes to how fans care about those things, and customers, consumers in general, and where companies, organizations, and certainly sports teams and leagues have a role to play as well. We talk about where these issues lie in the sports space, the right way to go about addressing them and activating them, why it's important, and just so many good things, great examples. It'll get you thinking. It'll get you thinking about different ways to produce content in the space as well, and just so much good stuff coming up in this chat with Aileen. So stick around for that. It's coming up right now. Back from our opening segment, and I am so excited for today's guest. We've already been having a great discussion. Now we're going to learn even more. My guest on the podcast today is Aileen McManamon. She is the founder and managing partner of 5T Sports Group. And welcome to the podcast today, Aileen.
Hey, Matt, Neil, I'm so glad to be here.
This is going to be so much fun. This is an area I've wanted to explore a lot. This is so much more important than it has been in previous years in the sports space, and we're going to have a great discussion. But before we get into the meat of our discussion, we want to learn about you. So tell us about your background, your career path, and any tips for folks that want to work in your space.
Oh, there's a lot of things to unpack there, Neil. My background. Let's get this right out in front. I am from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a very proud Clevelander. I don't live there now, but I aspire to one day again. So I am a big Browns, Cavs, and Guardians fan. I do like the name change. But I got an undergrad in economics and then a grad degree in international business, and promptly ran away to Germany and worked there for 5 years in the car industry. Yes, that's where I got my full-on start in sports, essentially, because as a brand director for Fiat and Alfa Romeo, I was running our all of our marketing and advertising, and a big chunk of that is sports, of course, when you're in the car business.
Yeah.
And then I kind of jumped back to the US and worked for about a dozen years in technology, because that was right ahead of the birth of the World Wide Web, and lots of things were exploding and really exciting new stuff. And I always like being part of exciting new things.
Yeah.
So I did that in a couple different capacities. And then I ended up in Vancouver, Canada. And I was still working in technology, but, they won that Olympic bid. And I'm like, ooh, I could go back to doing the fun stuff. Maybe in this town. So I took a flyer and I jumped back into the sports industry with my own company.
That's awesome. And how long have you had your own company now?
It has been 14 years,
and
2008.
That's fantastic. Congratulations, first of all, and already a great run and more years to come. Give our listeners an idea of what 5T Sports Group is all about, like an overview, and then I would love to chat more, of course.
Yeah, you bet. Well, when I was taking that jump from tech into sports, and I thought, oh man, I haven't been in this industry, even though I really follow it closely and the business of it too. So I thought, what skills can I bring to this industry? And then I was also thinking about what is going on in the sports industry that I think needs help, or, what can I bring to it? So the first things I saw was at that point, 2008, when I was starting to think about it, 2006, 2007. Not enough technology deployed in sports, and you'll know that from your own experience and background in the tech space. You said mobile ticketing to somebody, and they were like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah, they got better, but or CRM or any other efficient technologies. I saw sustainability was an issue. I was like, this is a really wasteful industry, and there's a lot of room for improvement on that front. Economist by training, hate waste. And then the third part was that I felt like our pro sports were starting to pull away from community. Everything was getting flashier, more professional, glitzier, big broadcast. We want the luxury suites. And as a kid growing up in Cleveland, I needed that. I needed to be able to get in on that $2 ticket,
Yeah.
back in the day, or whatever it was. It was pretty cheap. And I just felt like that was falling away. So those were the three principles that I started the company on: was technology, sustainability, and community, and reconnecting those things, reconnecting the professional sports industry to those elements, to power it forward. And I thought, this is where I know a little something about a little something.
Yeah, and talk about good timing for a reason. That it's not like technology has obviously exploded since then, and we've seen the advent of Web 2.0, and of course the increased interest and mandate almost to think about things like sustainability and being a value to the community and not taking away from it, both ecologically and economically as well. So take me back a little bit to that time in Germany. Like what did the brand goals look like for Alfa Romeo and Fiat? And like now we think of auto, and I think a lot about Formula E and how can we create more sustainable cars and not pollute and not have an F1 race, drive a ton of pollution. So like what did brand look like for those auto companies, and how has that kind of evolved a little bit over time?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things to look at. There's the auto industry in general, and what does brand look like? Brand looks like, I want very emotional, very, very emotionally driven, but obviously, I think maybe more so for us in North America and in a little bit other countries of Europe. But in Germany, of course, very technology driven as well, right? That's a high performance car that they're looking at when you're looking. So the challenge, anyway, what does brand look like? Brand success, or what are you trying to drive there? Hey, you got to love this car. You have to have a response to it. But in general, we're looking at foot traffic through the dealership. We want test drives. We want leads. Data. So in sports, a lot of that was around creating that emotional connection to the car, but also getting those leads in. So one of the ways that we focused on that, and again, here's the difference between a German manufacturer in Germany and an Italian auto manufacturer in Germany. It's very hard to compete against the Germans on the technology side. It's not impossible, but I mean, I won't say to compete, but to compete in the consumer's mind on that, right? So, Germans are rightly very proud of their engineering skill. They do build beautiful things and very robust things. So they're not going to look too well beyond a German brand. Mm-hmm. You have to come at them in a different way. So we would come at them with the passion and the emotion and all the things that they would go to Italy on vacation for, the beauty of it. So we're selling the car based on its looks and riveting up those emotions. And one of the ways that we did that was to focus on cycling as our big pillar of the marketing brand. So Tour de France, Giro d'Italia, all the national federations, and cycling racing is very big in Europe. So that was our kind of, and we would pitch that with, well, you really prefer to be on your bike, but sometimes you need a car to get to. So we even had a sustainability pitch back then.
No, that's an interesting way to look at things. I think about how we want to have the brand of a team or the loyalty to a team or identity of, hey, I am a fan of this club, therefore, and this club supports this auto manufacturer, therefore it has to fit together. And then you speak about the cycling side, where it's less about like a crest or a logo than like a football club, and more about a lifestyle or a participatory sport. And exactly. you see that play. Does that come into play even now, where is it more about like identifying and finding that intersection of team and brand and sponsor brand and team, and is that differentiated in more individual sports like a golf or a cycling or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I think when you'll see a certain other outlier brands, like if you think of Subaru, they're pitching you a lifestyle, right? They've decided who they're going for, right? They want that outdoorsy people, that person that's going mountain biking and camping and kayaking and they'll almost never show you a car in an ad that doesn't have a rack on the back or on the roof, or a tent in the ad. So I think most brands are trying to get back around to that lifestyle feeling. But specific to the car industry, there's such a proliferation of cars now. I mean, it's insane to me. I'm not kidding you when I tell you that in my area here where I live, there's someone driving around in a Bentley SUV.
Never thought I'd see
that. Why does Bentley make an SUV? That's a huge disconnect. But obviously, at least one person bought one, and it's
right.
Or even just Porsche making an SUV is a little bit odd to me. But are we going back to the lifestyle versus the brand? Yeah, I think but even a sports property has a brand, right? It has a personality.
How did you see the growth of Web 2.0 and social media? I mean, when you and I both, like, when you started 5T and when I was starting my career, social media was really, really taking off. It was not just college kids on Facebook anymore, and Twitter was becoming certainly more of a bigger thing, and then Instagram, and you had things like content that was in-house content. You had things like voice, where you can do a press release or you can say things in your own voice. So how did this sort of transform the way you looked at any industry, including sports, of course, of now the brand is not just what people say about you, but you can kind of influence at least the perception of it based on what you're putting out there?
Yeah, I mean, boy, that's a whole 8-series podcast, isn't it? Yeah, I guess when it comes down to it, brands are looking, we've gone through the whole influencer phase as well, which is still happening, but people can smell manufactured content. I think what we're at, I mean, I guess, we're calling it Web 3.0, but really even Web 2.5, let's say, it became much more of a conversation. The early day of Web 2.0 was just, okay, you could interact. On my website, I could put something up and you could shout back at me. But then we got to that place where it was an actual real back and forth conversation, as opposed to the brand just pushing out, and maybe they could disguise it behind an influencer and pushing out. But we all know that isn't really quite what's working anymore. And what we see are interesting things. Like, one of my favorite examples in the last little bit, and I hope you saw it, when that minute where the Super League was formed in Europe.
Oh yeah.
So for listeners who aren't aware, among the European football clubs, there were 6 English teams and 3 Spanish and 3 Italian that wanted to break away and have a league that would have non-relegation, and then they would be able to guarantee printing the money and all that good stuff. And that's very out of sync with how football really, really works over there. It's a little bit more let's call it owned and controlled. Sometimes literally, sometimes just to the fan. So anyway, these leagues decided all of a sudden to break away. Fans were livid, like instantly livid. And Heineken came out and ran the best ad ever. Within 24 hours, they had this thing out there, and it said, "Don't drink and start a league." Because they announced this league, I think, on Friday, and by Monday it was a dead in the water idea, because fans were so upset. They're like, we'll never cross your threshold again. Yeah. So there you had Heineken saying, look, you know what, we're partners with nearly all of those clubs, or most of them, and we're partners with UEFA running the Champions League. We're partners with so many things around football, but we're not going to let that stand in the way of our relationship with our fans, which are consumers. And we sense how they feel right now, and we're going to take all that energy and just channel it into what they really are thinking and feeling. Fantastic example of, I think, this era of branding. And branding is your values now. It's truly living your values.
And do you see it coming more of the side of, we know who we want to reach as our customer or as our fan, and we are going to try to be who they want us to be, versus kind of coming from the other direction of, this is who we want to be, and we're going to help fans fall in love with us, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes from from inside, it's not so much. I think this is where we've evolved to. Maybe it's a little Pollyanna, but it's not so much we and them. It's not us. We're the brand, and those are our consumers. Now it's like, well, we're the consumer too. We're all in. It's us.
Yeah.
Like, what do we collectively think here? So I think part of that as well is an evolution in business where employees have a lot more say, no matter what part of the company they're working from. It's really an interesting time.
We're all coming from a more human perspective, and brands are expected to have human values in many ways, and to respond to things that happen. And I think it's a perfect segue to talk about where we are now, where we have been the last few years, of not just worrying about values in the sports space and well beyond, of course, but specifically for sports, for our podcast today. Of now, it's not just good. Fans, customers expect more of their brands, and yes, we might have grown up. You were born into Cleveland fandom. I was born into San Diego fandom, and I never thought about if the San Diego Padres upheld my values, at least as a kid. It crossed my mind a little more now, but now it's like it's table stakes. Like if you don't align with certain values that I hold dear, you're not going to get my fandom, let alone my dollar. So how have you seen that? Has that really grown in importance in the last few years, and or even throughout your career? And what are you recommending teams do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really has, from the point where, people were saying, okay, I'm a fan and that's my team, but and starting to take like a timeout, from their teams at times, and saying, what, I'm just not, or maybe an entire league. Where they're feeling the league isn't handling things, like perhaps, the NFL and the concussion situation. A lot of people were like, maybe I'll spend a little less time on Sunday. I mean, I'm still interested in the sport and I love it, but I'm just not feeling so great about how I'm spending not just my dollars, but my time. Because we all sense that almost viscerally when things are off and they're not feeling right. So one thing, I think it's evolved from that. I'm not gung ho anymore. I'm not what do I want to say, like blinded to this. It's not a blind loyalty.
It's anymore. Not unconditional. Yeah.
We're becoming more critical. And now it's evolved even further forward, because we know this particular generation of fans will follow an athlete, and they have a greater affinity to the athlete than they do to the team, at times, and so, or even for those of us who are old school loyalists, like nobody's going to push me off of my Cleveland teams. Although I'm having a moment right now, I will say, with one of them, but
I can understand. I was almost
I'm not alone. There's probably about 50,000 fans that are having a moment going, you make space for other athletes in your fandom. You make space for even athletes that you're not particularly a fan of. You may have never seen them play, but you just love what they stand for.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting evolution of that, is that what we find is the more that someone stands for, the more drawn people are to that. And some people may be put off by it, but at least you know where they stand.
Yeah, and I think we've in the last few years, especially as well, we've seen this. Some brands, some teams, whatever vertical you want to look at, have thought that, okay, we have to stand for everything to everyone, and we got to make sure we make a statement about this. We got to make a statement about this, and it's like statements don't do much, action does much, and you can't take action on everything because you don't have endless resources. So when you're working with organizations, with businesses, with teams, with brands, how do you do you have to almost slap them in the face, be like, you don't have to have a stance on everything. Yes, it might be important to some of your fans and customers, but you can't be everything to everyone. So how do you balance that? We want to make sure our customers and fans know we're aligned on this with them, but it's not necessarily going to be one of our key pillars, because we have to pick and choose at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is where the technology helps you a lot because, if you're in conversations with your fans on social, for instance, if you have a good presence on social and you're following that conversation, you'll know what they care about and more and what they care about less.
Mhm.
And when something happens in your community, you better be there on it,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's in your wheelhouse or not in your wheelhouse, that's when to make a statement, or explain to better still statements, as you say, statements, that's a poster on the wall.
Mhm.
Um, that's a key opportunity to say, you know what, this is something that we care deeply about, and this is how we do that. Um, so, one of the things that when we work with either a team, a league, or a brand, we talk to them about what's material to your business. And sustainability, it's called a materiality index, but what's material to your business? Um, Obviously the NBA is quite attuned to issues in the Black community.
Mhm.
It's pretty material to their business. That's, a vast percentage of their athletes. It's the markets they operate in.
Yeah.
It's a vast percentage of their fan base. But it's also a cultural thing as well. Like there's a lot more of the African American culture is infused, and there's a lot of crossover in the NBA.
Yeah.
That I think the other leagues could only aspire to. Um, so obviously that's an issue that's really critical for them to focus on. If you look at something like the NFL, then it's a little bit more health, safety, and that kind of thing. Um, and when it comes down to things around environment, well, frankly, it doesn't matter where you are,
Right.
because
We're all on Earth.
as we can see by the image behind you, but here in the Northwest, we have wildfires. Actually, we have everything, but
Yeah.
it's coming everywhere. Everyone's experiencing flooding. Everyone's experiencing these once in a millennium events that, guess what? They seem to be really more frequent.
Yeah, you're right.
So, yeah, I mean, making a statement, can you come out on these things? Actually, the best approach is to really sit down and say, what are our values? What's most
Yeah.
important to us? If we're the San Diego Padres, or the Miami Dolphins or whatever, the New York Jets, probably winning would be important. But I could say that pokingly as a Browns fan, but
Do you
but
find
I mean, it's figuring out what is really core to your sport.
yeah. I think we've talked a lot recently about having brand documents, having a brand voice, and having a framework for that, and not just thinking it, but documenting it. Have you found that the teams, organizations that you work with are do they have these values documented? Have they had those conversations, or is this for some of them the first time they've actually had to sit down as a leadership group and be like, what do we stand for?
Yeah, I mean, like everything, you have your leaders, you have your middle of the road, you have your laggards. After 2020, I say 2020 is the year everybody got religion, right? We had concussive culture shocks, climate shocks, you know, social issue shocks, so everybody's like, okay, we need to figure this out. Um, but I mean, they do have values. They do have really stated values, and some really live those out. Like in the last little bit, I've had a pretty good view to MLB and how they live out their values,
Mhm.
and it's really quite stunning. Just as an example, this last All-Star game in Los Angeles, between MLB and the Dodgers, and of course the Dodgers Foundation is part of it, they spent $6 million in the local community, not on the All-Star game. They left that's the community legacy money. So they rebuilt a veterans homeless shelter, and not a small one, an 80-bed shelter that can house people for up to 2 years. They rebuilt a boys and girls club. They rebuild fields everywhere, and they
Oh,
leave legacy money behind. They don't just come in and tidy it up and then walk away. They make sure that there's legacy money there to keep that going. They make sure it's all networked into the local community that's going to then use those facilities.
yeah.
So it's really something that isn't talked about enough. I feel. So, better storytelling out there.
And also we found I just you perfect segue for me too there. I want to jump into that storytelling aspect of things. I think when COVID first hit and we had the gradual reopenings of venues for whatever it was, concerts or live sports events, I never saw so many cleaning videos and photos on social, and it became a thing to demonstrate here's what we're doing, and to a lesser extent, here's what we're doing to make sure that we're safe and sustainable and moving forward as well. So like now there's this need to we talk about the statements can be hollow, but actions speak louder than words, and how we can help do that storytelling and put content out there on social that is going to perform, meaning that people will actually watch it and I want to watch it and share it, while also delivering that messaging of here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's why it should matter to you. So what have you seen, and what should we be thinking about as it comes to conveying and storytelling in this space to our fans?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great example to follow through. I think old school sports, if it had happened, they would have been like, "Yep, we're reopening, and come if you want, or don't. That's your choice, but we're open."
Yeah.
To maybe if you moved ahead to, I don't know, around early aughts or whatever, is that what we call them, the aughts? But they might have said, "Yo, hey, we're clean and Clorox is sponsoring us and blah blah blah, and we're clean." Yeah. And now you get this deeper, richer storytelling of, let us explain to you how much we care for you as a fan and how we want you to feel comfortable in our building. You can't imagine any owner or front office saying something like that 20 years ago, right? Even 10 years ago. They would have just, again, pushed information out and not worried about how people absorbed it. But this is the power of social for us now, is that people spend a little bit more time trying to get it right because they'll get that instant feedback. So there's a lot of read and react, I think, that happens as sports entities are communicating with their fans. Yeah. And when they get slapped on the wrist, they're like, "Okay, we heard you. We're going to rethink this."
Totally. No, it's definitely so much better to see that action beyond a statement, beyond even a certification or a lead certification from a state.
Beyond lip service, right? Yeah. Beyond lip service, just kind of coming, "Hey, yeah, no, we're going to actually find out." But I mean, that an entertainment dollar is hard to fight for. So
totally, but it goes back to what we were saying. It's part of wanting to understand and appreciate the values of your fans as well, and your consumers. I actually since it came off the top of my head, I mentioned it, that idea of LED lead ratings for venues. How important is that in reality, and do we need to do a better job of, like, is it just something you slap on to check off a box saying look at us, or it, like, are teams and organizations actually following through, and do fans even know, would an average fan even know what lead ratings even mean, and are we doing a good job of educating them on that?
Yeah. Let's see. On the first front, are they just slapped on the building? No, they're hard to earn. Mm-hmm. But what isn't often realized is, once it's earned, it doesn't have to be necessarily maintained, right? Yeah. So, and you can build a LEED platinum building, but if you don't operate it according to kind of a LEED platinum way, then it's just like your house. You could build a beautiful house, but if you don't maintain it, then it could be a complete, haunted house wreck, shack. Right.
It was pristine on day one.
There is a LEED standard for operating, for operations, and that's the more important one that I would look for. Do we need to educate the fans about that? I don't know. I think that's a little bit going into the weeds for a fan. Yeah. For the fans who get it, they'll be like, "Oh, wow, okay, LEED is good. I know, I've seen that before. It's a good thing. I've heard of it. That's great. I'm happy they're doing that." I don't know that the average fan needs to be that educated on it. I think what's more important now in the space that I'm quite focused on and very controversial and fun, ESG, this concept of environmental and social governance, which is an evolution of CSR, which is an evolution of philanthropy. But fundamentally, environmental and social governance, beyond the SEC reporting and that kind of thing, it means you're operating to a set of values and principles that mean I care about environmental issues, I care about social issues, I care about people issues, I care about economic issues, and I take on my business decisions with all of that in mind, not just my next quarter's financial results.
With that in mind, it's a few minutes left here with Aileen McManamon. She is the founder and managing partner of 5T Sports. We're hitting on so many great subjects. I've always wanted to talk about this stuff with someone that is knowledgeable, and you are extremely knowledgeable and insightful on these conversations. And I want to talk about this concept of quote unquote greenwashing. You and I talked about it a little bit offline and it goes right back to, why you're doing what you're doing and doing things for show, but sometimes you're doing it for show. It can still have positive benefits, positive gains, and no one necessarily questions your incentives. Then in other cases, you have maybe a little more fake greenwashing, I guess, where you might be buying carbon credits but still polluting a ton yourself or whatnot. So what should we know about greenwashing? What do you see in the sports space, and is there that net positive sometimes, even if they're not doing it for the quote unquote the right altruistic reasons?
Greenwashing, yeah. So again, I mean, I think that again, coming back to the digital and the social connection, is there's a greater emphasis on transparency. And that's part of this whole ESG movement as well. A big part of that is reporting, not just saying, "Oh, we're doing this." You have to report in to people, and they'll know whether you're doing it. But more importantly than that, your own employees will know. In 2020, I watched amazing things happening where, I was trying to find it before we jumped in here. Employees will out their own companies if they're not doing what they say they're doing. You saw tech workers walk out when they say, "Yeah, no, we're not actually a gender equal or a racially equal company. We're horrible, and we're not gonna take it, and we want change, or we're walking out." You saw it with Black Lives Matter. There was actually an amazing crowdsourced set of Google slides that came out very quickly after Black Tuesday, and it was brand managers, their own brand managers in some cases, putting up, "This is what my company says they're doing. This is what they are doing. Here's the gap, or here's the reality of it." It's just it was like 200 slides of 200 different brands of people outing their companies in real time. I was sitting there watching it, getting populated in some cases, going, "Oh my God." So that's the risk that you run, right? So in terms of greenwashing, it's really not worth it. It's like they say, it takes you 20 years to build a reputation and about a minute to lose it, right? So are people trying? Yes, but I think there's also an extra harshness. People will just assume that a high carbon industry, like oil and gas, like automotive, like aviation, are just awful because they're such high pollution. But when in fact, when you look at individual companies, you can see how they're working very hard toward a transition.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but I always say it's like a class full of students, right? They might all flunk a certain test, but that doesn't mean that you don't have A students, B students, C students, D students.
Oh, it's very true.
Same. Or it's like looking at one student and saying, "Well, they flunked this test, but normally they're an A student, so or they're a B student or whatever." So their carbon and their environmental record is one part of it. It's a pretty important part right now, and it's one we should keep a lot of pressure on them for. But I think we also have to acknowledge what they're doing, some of these companies, to advance things, to go in the right direction, because there's a lot of investment being made. Look at the car industry. How quickly they're trying to move from combustion engines to EVs. Now, we could all slap them on the wrist pretty hard and saying, "Well, you should have been there 30 years ago." Yes, they should have. But, they're moving now. So I think there's more good that can be done by saying, "We see you. Good work so far. We expect more." Just like a coach would to an athlete. That's pretty good. that was a pretty good day out there, but tomorrow we're going to push it another step further.
Build good habits. When you look at the greater CSR space or cause-based marketing, whatever you want to call it, and you're talking to executives, you're talking to leadership, is it almost seen as, okay, how I mean, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. How is this going to affect our bottom line? We want to be a more sustainable and responsible organization because it'll get our fans to like us more. And at the end of the day, we want fans to like us, so they spend more money with us and are retained. Versus that more, we understand the platform that we have. We are an important beacon for this community, and we can either use it positively or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most important thing that sports can do, actually, because the sports industry is a component of everything going on. Is still relatively small. As large as the sports industry is, it's still a small component of the overall economy. But like you say, the platform that they have is quite substantial. So it's a great place, where they should approach it from is saying, look, we're not doing this because it's a nice thing to do or it's the right thing to do. You're doing it at this point to preserve your business on the environmental side. So energy, water, waste. As you know, you're in San Diego,
Oh yeah.
West Coast water's a thing. California's introduced some pretty heavy duty legislation requiring water reuse, all kinds of water conservation measures that are permanent, not just, oh, it's a drought, so we're going to put on the lawn watering restrictions and we're going to take them back off again. Mm-hmm. This is going to be kind of permanent stuff. So if you're an entity that wants to survive, you're going to have to figure that out. Fans, even if they're fans, they're going to be like, well, you know what, we need water for people. So that kind of takes precedent over, Sunday's game. But see, at the end of the day, that water will get shut off because for non-priority things, right? We've seen it happen in a number of the world's cities. So there's a lot of reasons to do this. One is self-preservation is a big one.
Oh yeah.
But on the upside, it's being able to demonstrate, hey, look, we've taken this little microcosm. Every stadium or arena is a miniature city, right? It's got restaurants, it's got,
Holy.
It's got all these things going on. There's transportation going on in and around it. So there's a lot of opportunities to both test and showcase these kinds of technologies that if they can run this stadium, well, sure, they can run your office building or they can run your home in some cases. And then leveraging that platform out to both the business community and the fans is great leverage. And what are you seen as? You're seen as an innovator. Everybody loves an innovator, right?
Totally. No, I love that perspective. One last thing with you, Aileen, before we get to the shareable stat, I promise I could pepper you with questions all day. This is really informative. And it's the idea of how, I guess, cognizant and scrutinizing that fans are becoming of not just the teams and leagues and venues they support, but also their partners. Like I think about from the athlete side as well of, hey, like, should an athlete be responsible if something bad comes out about XYZ shoe manufacturer and they have a lifetime deal with them or whatever it might be? Like, is it to the point where fans are expecting the teams they support to also scrutinize their partners and holding them accountable for that? Like, how far and granular do we have to get these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen some good examples. And it's probably not as well known down south unless you're a hockey fan. But so I'm sitting here in Vancouver, Canada, and Hockey Canada has been in a pretty horrific scandal for the last 4 or 5 months. But one of the sponsors, and hockey is God up here, right? It's
totally.
It's getting pushed a little off that podium. But here's what they have some very significant sponsors who have invested for a long, long time in that space. It's hard for them to immediately walk away from a property, but they handled it very wisely. The first one came out was Scotiabank and said, look, this is unacceptable. This is how these are our values and they're not reflected in this situation. So what we're going to do is pull back. They were very clear about the actions they were going to take. They didn't just make a statement and stick it on the wall. They said,
I remember that.
we're going to pull back all of our advertising from the men's game. We're going to pull it back from this particular event, the World Junior Championships, which is a big deal for them in this market. We will continue our funding for grassroots hockey and for women's hockey. So that was a way that a brand came out with a very ugly situation where, you know, you're risking a lot being associated with this particular federation right now. It's quite bad. And here you are, a company that spends millions and millions and millions on your brand. So you have to make a hard decision there, you know, and I think in the past, the knee-jerk reaction would have been to walk away. An example more close to home was what happened with the now Commanders, you know,
Daniel Snyder,
but they were given a timeline. It was FedEx that stood up and said, you know what, we think we've kind of had enough. And, you know, we've been talking. You have 2 weeks. Because we honestly, you know, cannot risk that damage to our brand to continue to associate with your brand. So I think similarly, athletes can take that stand where they have a partnership and say, I'm not, you know, I'm not comfortable with what's happening here. So either we're going to have a conversation about it, and we're going to solve it together. I think we had a similar example in the PJ as well. You know, on the flip side, one of the players, you know, made some remarks that were not terrific, and some of the partners dropped him, and other partners said, well, let's try and see if we can make this a teachable moment. And they worked together and had him come out and talk about, you know what, I'm very ashamed of what I said, and you know, so because that particular brand had values that valued diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they said, look, we're all about trying to advance this. You're pulling it down. Let's figure out how to make you part of the advancement through this mistake that you've made.
I like that a lot. It's a great solution to difficult problems. Is, hey, let's work together to improve this or progress this. I said that was one last thing that I wanted to ask though about, do we need an athlete or athletes to take sustainability as their number one cause? Like, I think there's a lot of athletes now that are using their platforms very well. You know, we saw a lot of it, of course, with racial injustice throughout the pandemic. We saw a lot of messaging with Get Out the Vote, and many other things that athletes are globbing onto. But I could think of maybe a couple athletes who have done some things in the greater environmental space. But do we need that superstar? And is that superstar out there that is going to say, hey, like, I am going to take an environment and make it my cause?
Yeah, I mean, there are athletes out there. Actually, there's quite a few, a little bit more in Europe than here, but there's certainly strong ones here as well. But here's the thing, Neil, these aren't separate things, right? They're all interrelated. So as you have athletes speaking about social justice, you know, they're also speaking about, you know, having things not taken away from everyone for the benefit of the few. It's a very similar concept in the environment. You have folks who are pulling natural resources and damaging ecosystems and doing things that damage something that really truly belongs to everyone for the benefit of a few. So there's a term for that we have called environmental justice, right?
Yeah.
As you know, I mean, and I think this was one of the if there's a silver lining to COVID, I think it helped people understand these connections better, that it wasn't choose this or choose that. And I experienced that in my own work, because I found that I was working either in social silos or environmental silos. But once we did stop going to work and all those cars were off the road and we could breathe a little easier, and all of a sudden a whole lot of birds were in our neighborhoods that we never noticed before because they really weren't there. You know, and just that appreciation for being able to go outside. We had appreciation for our local businesses that we maybe had driven past to go get something a little bit cheaper at the big box store, we started to understand, oh, wait a minute, I need to support that local business because he's the last guy in town that has toilet paper. And it doesn't matter that he's charging 5 cents more for the giant pack than the big box store. Like, I would gladly at this point pay $100 more for it. So I'm so glad he's here. And same with your local restaurant, right?
Yeah.
I don't appreciate it until it's almost gone. So I think people started to understand, oh, okay, that's why I need to support local business. Oh, that's why I really need to be better about, caring for the environment, maybe driving a little bit less so that I personally can enjoy this cleaner air. It's my personal action that actually gets a net benefit for me. But at the same time, seeing the disproportionate suffering of the people who take care of us,
Totally,
who are typically people from our less advantaged communities, and how suddenly they rose in value in our eyes as well, collectively.
yeah. It's so well put. Like, I love the idea of everything is connected, and it's cool how it's come together in your space, and now you're not operating in those silos anymore because it is about what can we do to help the collective.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the better parts of why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important is when you have those voices at the table, then you have that other perspective,
Yeah.
as opposed to just, well, this is the way that, kind of the mainstream, Wall Street-y type world works. We're getting to a flattening in a way of a pyramid, or at least a better connection of it.
I love it. Leaving us with inspired a bit here, but we're gonna have some fun with you, Aileen, coming up in our more McManamon segment. First, this episode's shareable stat. It's coming up right now. So great picking the brain of Aileen McManamon. She has been around, seen a lot of it, and really is coming on at a great time. Certainly the last few years, the last decade plus since she's been with 5T Sports. And certainly during the last few years with racial injustice, with COVID, with everything sort of coming to the forefront, and customers and fans saying, and sponsors and athletes saying, we've had enough, and we want things to change. And so stick around for some more fun with Aileen coming up in our more McManamon segment. You definitely want to stick around for that because there's a lot more good stuff there as well. But first, this episode's shareable stat. And today's shareable stat is right in line with the theme of today's episode. And we have a couple of stats to throw at you, and it's about how sports fans feel about these issues that we're discussing around sustainability and ESG and environmental responsibility and CSR in general. And the shareable stats I'm going to share with you are, first, that 53% of sports fans consider themselves an environmentalist. 53%, and that's all. What's interesting about that even more is that is over-indexing compared to the global total. That's according to a study from YouGov, which you probably heard of before. So sports fans over-index on being or considering themselves an environmentalist. Another stat that's kind of in that space is 47% of sports fans consider whether companies are environmentally responsible when they're making purchase decisions. 47%, almost 1 in 2 sports fans stop and think when they're making a purchase, is this company that I'm about to support with my money environmentally responsible? So just so much good things to think about when it comes to that. And very much aligns with what I've been talking about today with Aileen around how can sports teams help ensure their fans, their consumers, the fans of the future as well, teams and leagues and athletes even, that they care about these things. That by being a fan of that team, by spending some of your hard-earned money on tickets, on merchandise, or even following the team on social and retweeting them or liking their Instagrams or TikToks, that you are doing something that's helping the world. It's ultimately you're on the right side of history. That by being a fan, you are doing right. So how can we think about different and creative ways to show fans, help fans be part of it? Not just look at us, look at how great we are with what we're doing. Yes, that stuff still matters, as long as it's more than just a statement, as Aileen and I talked about. But also helping fans feel like they're part of it as well. So that when they engage with you, it's not just for the sake of engagement. It's not just for the sake of shouting into the atmosphere how much they love the team, but that they can be part of the solution as well. That by supporting their team, by supporting your team, their favorite athletes, that they are also doing a net positive for the world. and no matter what area that may be, whether it's environmentalism or DE&I, as we talked about as well with Aileen. So some powerful stats there for sure. I know it has me inspired and has me thinking. I hope it does for you as well. As we talked about with Aileen, there's so many different creative ways to activate these issues to help fans, again, feel a part of it. This generation, you make it as many generalizations as you want about Gen Z. They want to stand up and do something. They want to be participating. They expect their brands that they support, their teams they support, to be participating as well. And not just, again, being a broadcast platform, but a participating platform. So again, those stats one more time. 53% of sports fans consider themselves an environmentalist, and that's more so than the rest of the world, over-indexing on environmentalism. And then 47% of sports fans consider whether companies are environmentally responsible when they're making purchases. So certainly when they're deciding if they're going to continue to support your team, and that goes across the board with a lot of issues. But in this case, environmentalism was the theme at hand for this shareable stat. So again, think about it, talk about it. We always love our shareable stats, but more importantly, stick around because you're going to have more fun and more information coming from Aileen McManamon of 5T Sports Group. Right back from this episode's shareable stat, and I am joined once again by Aileen McManamon. She is the founder and managing partner of 5T Sports Group. Aileen, you left us thinking, stimulated, inspired. Are you now ready to give us a little bit more McManamon?
Oh, I don't know if you need more McManamon.
All right, number one for you. We're gonna get some more, and this number one is the one that I'm excited to ask this question. So you oversaw a baseball team, the Vancouver Canadians. Tell us about who they are, what that experience was like, because I'm all ears.
Yeah, that was that was my my cup of coffee, as we say in baseball. So the Vancouver Canadians at the time were the single A short season affiliate of the Oakland A's.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really interesting time to be associated with the A's, right? Because it was right around the time, or not shortly after Moneyball had come out, and, so the Oakland A's were a bit at the talk of the town. It was pretty amazing in a way because that had been my dream as a kid to work in baseball. I always wanted to go work for the Guardians, and they haven't hired me yet, but maybe after they hear this podcast. But anyway, I came in as the GM, and it was pretty interesting and bold of the new ownership group because I was introduced in the paper as little league mom chosen to run Vancouver Canadians.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, okay, that doesn't make those guys look real good, but it did bring the business background to it. That's why they hired me. And it was pretty fascinating. I mean, they were looking at a renaissance, had renovated the stadium. A lot of people would say, "Oh yeah, I love the Canadians." I'm like, really? When was the last time you were there? Because I knew that the team had been, floundering. Right. The attendance had been going down. People were like, oh yeah, oh geez, I guess maybe it's been about 10 years. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. So that's what we're here to fix. And I'm happy to say they're thriving and doing really well now. But yeah, experience of a lifetime.
All right, so the $1 million question then, like in our lifetime, or maybe even beyond our lifetime, will there be a Major League Baseball team in Vancouver?
I don't think so.
So Toronto will be the baseball city in all of Canada.
But I wouldn't discount Montreal. That's a pretty, and I won't say that baseball isn't huge here. In fact, you probably said the Little League team that goes to the World Series often comes out of British Columbia, and they did this year as well, and they went quite far and they did great. It's a good baseball culture. Unfortunately for us, in the summer here in Vancouver, two things on the sports front. We have MLS, we have CFL, Canadian Football League, we have CEBL, which is a Canadian basketball league that's just a couple of years old. So that's we have a few of the things. We have some lacrosse going on, which up here is box lacrosse or indoor lacrosse. And then on top of that, I think you said you've been to Vancouver, so you're competing with what we call supernatural British Columbia. Amazing mountain. You're competing with the summer cottage, the people going out on kayaks, the fact that it takes a while to get warm up here. So it can be very difficult to put a sports franchise in, a summer sports franchise, an additional one.
Yeah.
and draw the kind of numbers that you need. And as we see, even in very established baseball cities, they're having a very tough time. So that's a little bit of a schedule issue. I think there's a bit of a crowded summer season issue. It's definitely not a baseball culture issue, but I think it would be difficult. And on the third front, there's really not a place for that right size facility to go.
Well,
to be a true baseball facility.
at least we have some baseball up there and some baseball culture. That's what matters most to me as a lifelong baseball player and fan. Number two for Eileen. Tell me throughout your career so far, tell me the most memorable campaign or initiative that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, there's one that I really like that I won't take from my own career, but it was done up here and wasn't seen very widely. And that was the BC Lions. The CFL team did a multi-year campaign actually called "Be More Than a Bystander," and it was an anti-domestic violence campaign.
Wow.
That had the players going out to schools and talking, about how you can, even as a kid, how you can recognize it, what you can do about it, which I thought was just really brilliant and very powerful to put that out there. So it was a multifaceted campaign, but I think that bringing that into that space where children are especially vulnerable, and especially if they're younger. Young men, or or a little bit older boys, there's a lot of powerlessness in that moment, right? Of being maybe 12 or 14, and you're certainly not able to overpower a grown man, but you're being given a set of tools. So I think that was a very important campaign. Wow. I would love to see that replicated elsewhere. So that's one that's always stood with me as a memorable one. And another one that's kind of a little bit more fun and lighthearted. And they did it, and I've seen it done a couple other places, but they also did a breast cancer awareness campaign where they had people come and bring bras and donate them and ring the inside of the stands with the bras, and then brand new bras, and then those were of course donated to like women's shelters and things like that. So I love that embracing of the female fans, embracing of the community as a whole. I think those were very powerful campaigns.
Yeah, I love those examples, and it goes right back to what we're talking about with using that platform that teams have in a powerful and effective manner. Number three for Aileen. This one might be might be tough. There could be a lot of answers here. So tell me the sustainability issue that fans value the most right now, and the issue that you think they should be valuing more or be caring about more.
I couldn't say what they value the most right now, because I think that differs. What they see the most, of course, is recycling. But what I say with what they should value more is coming back to my earlier point. All issues are local.
Yeah.
So what you see around you is what you should care about the most. Obviously, it affects you the most. So in your neck of the woods, certainly water is an issue that people should care a lot about. In other issues in Texas, I think you probably want to worry a little bit about energy. But these are but all issues are local at the end of the day. And those are the environmental issues, but care about, lifting up people in your community.
I love that sentiment, and it certainly underscores the point of having these teams and universities and venues, whatever it might be, that they are the biggest platform that the locality has.
Yeah, not just a platform, not just kind of a stage broadcast platform, Neil, but also a unifying platform.
Yeah.
When we go to see sports, that's where you're going to see a professor and a plumber sitting next to each other, or a Republican and a Democrat, if we know what those are anymore. I don't know. But a Yankee and a Southerner. Well, maybe not so much, but maybe at the Super Bowl or something. People are sitting side by side that are coming from very different backgrounds, but in that moment, they're united in that passion for the team, in that everybody's pulling on that same rope. So this is really the lever that our sports teams can use, the broadcast and the media, and of course, people are paying attention, so you can use whatever medium you have to speak to the issue, but that's just the putting the poster on the wall.
Right. No,
Um,
that's powerful. I love that. I have goosebumps just thinking about that mindset, that sentiment of it is one thing that we don't agree on everything, but we can agree that we love this team and we can agree that we want this planet to stick around as long as possible. We can agree that we want potable drinking water, we want electricity, and it starts with that idea of you go hand in hand with your team. I like that.
yeah, well, we're united in our dislike for the other team. I won't use
Right.
the H word, but so imagine things like getting your fans all rolling on a food bank challenge.
Yeah.
Not just going, and this is where some of these things fall flat. They're like, oh, bring a can to the game. Oh, bring this, or do that. Or how about, hey, let's beat the other guys. We're going to do better than them. Our team might
Yeah.
lose today, but this is in our control as fans. So you can really rally people around taking actions collectively. And even when it has a little bit of, like a little bit of animosity to it, that's okay. Because you have to press the buttons, the emotional buttons that people respond to. And sometimes that's, if a big game is coming up, press that button.
I love that. That's a great campaign structure. That's really I'm gonna write that one down. All right, number 4. This is a good one here. You lived in both the U.S. and now Canada, and other parts of the world as well, of course, in Germany. So tell me, what is one of the key differences between sports properties in Canada and sports properties in the U.S. or elsewhere even?
Yeah. I would say in the US still tends to be the most innovative in sports. Although we're seeing, if you follow the information or the work of Sports Innovation Lab, they'll put out their list of the most innovative teams around the world, and that is a very global list. But I would say on par, we tend to be a bit more innovative in terms of, hey, this is a new technology, let's go play with that. I just did a whole report on US sports tech innovation for a European entity, and just seeing how much we'll play with things, to test them out but that is catching on. So that's a big difference. And I know that one that's been that I've been made more aware of lately, as Europeans are elevating women's football quite a bit. And I can tell you that's been a massive leap forward in about 3 years.
It really has.
In terms of how they've invested in the game and the attendance records. I'm sure you've seen them just going crazy. But, a good friend and colleague over there said to me, he's like, man, I went to that women's game. He goes, it was such a different atmosphere. It was so, friendly and like people were really happy and cheering. It wasn't this kind of embedded anger and, vitriol that comes with their long history in European men's football, soccer. Right. So they were like, wow, this was so different. And they said, and what he said to me, he goes, I felt like I was at a game in the US. And I'm like, well, okay, certain games that wouldn't feel like that, but many of them it does, right? Because you could be sitting next to, God forbid, a Steelers fan and still be nice to them. You're not going to try and beat them up. There'd be some trash talking, but generally we're a little bit more jovial. And so that's a difference that I see.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Next one up for yelling. That was fun. Just call out what's the one standout organization in the sports space that you want to call that just does a great job in driving sustainability goals?
You know what? I think on this one I'm going to call out the Minnesota Twins. They've really been at it for quite a while. I mean, there are many to call out. I could also, forgive me, the Golden State Warriors. They do a great job as well. Again, Cleveland, pardon. But when we talk about the broader sustainability right now, in terms of who's living that most evolved version of it, it's absolutely hands down Angel City FC. Wow. They know what their values are, and they're living them out every day. And you know what? This is a great example for everybody else. They're killing it.
Yeah.
They're taking in more sponsorship money than any MLS club is.
Oh, yeah.
They're killing it. They have brands lined up that want to be a part of that organization. That doesn't usually happen that way, right? Yeah. It's the sports property knocking on doors going, we want your money.
That's a great call. Angel City FC might be like a paradigm for the modern sports organization of how they go about it.
They truly are. They truly are. And another an example from across the pond, if you haven't heard of the Forest Green Rovers, which I think everybody has by now. But they're just, I mean, similarly living out their values, putting it right out there, communicating it to the fans, bringing everybody along. And the next thing you know, you're promoted a couple levels. Who knows? Maybe we'll see them in the Premier League.
Those are some great examples. I love that. This is to be a fun one for you, Aileen. Number 6. Tell me the most memorable sports event that you've ever been at.
Just one?
Or a couple, but
okay.
The one at
16. So I think hands down, if I think of like what really went right into my core in terms of being at the actual game, was the then Indians, now Guardians, 1995 World Series Game 3. Because I think I just sat there for the first 3 innings, staring down at the World Series emblem on the field, going, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I really can't believe it. So I'm not even sure what happened the first 3 innings of that game because I was in a fog. But after that, I would say that going to the Cavs parade was pretty fantastic.
Oh, I bet. Oh, wow.
I jumped a plane and that was joy beyond joy. But I was actually dating myself at the 1990 Tour de France when Greg LeMond won the Tour de France. So that was a great moment for Americans in cycling and in European sports. And he actually lapped the rider ahead of him. So we couldn't believe that, we could not believe our eyes because we're like, well, wait a minute, this is a time trial.
Wow.
And I have the most beautiful painted image of that from my brother-in-law. He did this really cool abstract of it. So
it's super cool. You've had some cool experiences. I'm impressed. How about
before anybody gets jealous, I've never been into a Super Bowl, but I've vowed never to go until the Browns are there.
Maybe in a couple decades, who knows? But how about a venue? Tell me your favorite sports venue you've been at.
Ooh, boy, oh boy. I don't know. That is a tough one, I think. I will say I'm pretty partial to Progressive Field for the way the restaurants are laid out there. I spend a lot of time at what is now T-Mobile Park.
Okay. Yeah,
but in terms of very, very cool innovations happening in the venue, I would say it's Johan Cruyff Arena in Amsterdam.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, they have an innovation lab in the stadium.
That is impressive.
Tech innovation lab in the stadium. So, yeah, they're piloting stuff all the time.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Aileen, time for our food question. We always love our food questions. So I'm gonna double this one up here a little bit. So first, tell me the best meal to get in Vancouver and where we're gonna get it, and then also I want to hear about the best meal to get in Cleveland.
Oh yeah. Best meal in Vancouver is almost always going to be sushi. It's if you're just a sushi fan, it's relatively inexpensive, although a lot of people will say now it's ramen, but I'm a sushi person. So where to get it? Misu is one of the top places.
Okay, I like it.
So that would be my call on that. In Cleveland, again, you're making me choose a favorite child here. But yeah, unfortunately, one of their very best restaurants just closed the doors. But right now, I would say my hands down favorite is Il Carnicero in Lakewood, Ohio, which is a suburb just west of the city. And that's a Mexican place. And they have a sister restaurant called, I think, Mamocho. So that's where I send people.
What's the go-to order there? What should I get?
Oh, the carrots elote is an appetizer that will make you rethink carrots. I think it would make Bugs Bunny question his entire life where he'd been. But they also do a trio of guacs that's to die for. Yeah, no, you can't go wrong on that menu.
I'll tell you, being in San Diego, the bar for Mexican food is high, but I'll take you up on.
I think Well, you know what? I'll tell you what. You and I will go, and then you can tell me.
I love it. Last one for you, Eileen. Before you get to your shout outs, tell me what are I always think about what the like sort of the order of powers are when it comes to sports leagues. So tell me, what are the top five most popular sports leagues among fans in Canada? And they could be Canadian based, they could be US based, could
Yeah.
be abroad.
Yeah, I think right now in kind of order, NHL is still king,
Hmm.
um, for sure when you take the entire country. But the NBA is right up there. For the rep, it helps when you win a championship, right?
Totally.
So I would say the NBA is right there and very very popular. And Canada has a very large immigrant community, right? So this is
Mhm.
something that they can relate to a little bit more sometimes than the NHL.
Mhm.
Very multicultural society up here. Um, After that, I would say probably the NFL. There's
Mhm.
a lot of affinity for NFL teams. I see it. It's what I see and what people are wearing. There's,
Yeah.
I think, something like crazy, like 10% of the Seahawks season ticket holders are Canadian,
Wow.
right?
That's insane.
And I know a lot of people go now to Buffalo as well. Um,
Right.
After that, I'm sure MLB, but a little maybe less so. Definitely, there's a lot of affinity for Premier League here.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then I couldn't speak to your fringe stuff, like but for sure, when UFC is on, everybody's all in on that.
Right.
And of course, like the rest of the world, quite taken with F1 now, and you've got two Canadian drivers in there. So,
Yeah.
but I think that's still going to be a sport that's a little off to the side. Um, and I'll certainly tell you, Canadians enjoy their Olympians quite a bit. I think it's more common that, and I know I didn't really mention soccer in here. Obviously, that's a big deal, and we do have three teams. Um, I couldn't speak to it. I don't know their broadcast numbers, but I just don't feel that viscerally,
Yeah.
from people. Because people do talk to me about their sports affinities all the time. They're like, "Oh, you're in sports. Oh, did you see this game or did you see that?" Yeah,
No, it's super interesting. I always love hearing about what leagues around the world are resonating in different parts of the world. Eileen, we had a lot more fun with our more McManamon segment. Now your chance to take over the podcast and tell us your social media all-star to follow. Just tell us what platform they're on and tell who they are and why they're worth following.
yeah. Well, okay. One of my all-time favorites, and this goes a ways back, is for sure JW Cannon. Um,
Oh yeah.
who is always tweeting about really cool stuff in sponsorship. He catches some really funny stuff, and he's a funny guy. And he'll loop quite a few people in, and so there's probably a group of 4 or 5 people. If you're following his tweets, then you see the
Totally.
same cast of suspects, and that's always good fun. Um, yeah, who else? Windy D's is one of
Yeah.
those people. D's tweets. She's
Okay.
good to follow too. She's always got some great commentary. Who else am I following? And that's mostly Twitter. I will say I'm a pretty Twitter bound person.
Yeah.
And I try to, I know there's a lot going on Instagram, but I'm afraid to go down that rabbit hole during the day. I think it's a little easier sometimes to pull yourself out of a Twitter rabbit hole than an Instagram rabbit hole. But
I
yeah,
imagine too, like the type of messaging that you're trying to focus on oftentimes is can resonate and grow and amplify quite a bit on a platform like TikTok, where a lot of causes are
yeah.
snowballing quickly on there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I go in, I dabble, but I was like, I'm unfortunately like that dog chasing a squirrel. I'm like shiny object, a squirrel, So
I
I
will tell
have to
you,
watch myself, otherwise I will never get anything done. Like,
very true. There's a reason they have ridiculous session lengths. But go on TikTok and search, hashtag sustainability and see what you see. Probably some cool content inspiration there.
yeah, or search the hashtag green sports if you're interested in environmental stuff. I will tell you, like Maddie J. Orr is a fantastic person to follow on that.
Mhm.
Also a Canadian, working out of London. There's really some good stuff out there, but on the social side or on the social justice side, Boy, you can't even get started. Just follow the WNBA.
They're great.
Whatever's happening in that conversation is pretty spot on.
And how about you, Aileen? Where can we find you as well as all things 5T Sports on digital and social media?
Yeah. You can find me at Ms_sportsbiz with a Z. Or if you're up here in Canada listening, with a Z. So at Ms_sportsbiz, and you find 5T Sports at 5tsports.com.
There you go. Check her out. She is full of great information and frankly inspiration as well. Really enjoy picking your brain today, Aileen, and learning from you. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, I had a blast too, Neil. I was so happy when you reached out because we've been connected for so long. And I follow you on Twitter as well and see some awesome stuff there. I love it when there's people out there that are pointing me in the direction of what I need to be paying attention to. And I've certainly gotten that from your posts over the years. So thank you so much. A privilege and an honor for me to join you today.
I love to hear. I appreciate it. And the feeling is definitely mutual. This was a long time coming and it was awesome.
All right, let's go for Mexican food. Cleveland, San Diego.
Perfect. Oh, I love it. So great picking the brain of Aileen. We had even more bonus content before we started recording and after as well. Just a delight to talk to. Really smart, really thoughtful responses. Really gets the space and can speak from experience and continues to see it play out with the organizations that she works with today. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. You can hit me up on LinkedIn where I post more content. On Twitter, NJH287. Don't miss a thing. You can visit the website, dsmsports.net, for the full archive and more blog posts and all that good stuff. And of course, follow us along. Look for every episode on your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.